Food, we all need it daily, but as the world population increases, so do agricultural demands. So how can we make the food on all our plates more environmentally friendly? We find out on this episode of Sustainable Energy. Hello and welcome to Belgium, more precisely in Brussels. I'm Asha and I'll be your guide as we meet the innovators who are adding the ingredient of nature-based solutions to our food industry. After all, according to our World in Data website, food production is responsible for around a quarter of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. From livestock to landfill to gas-guzzling supply chains, what we eat doesn't always come with a healthy carbon footprint. Coming up on the show, we meet the innovators looking to go green.
Eating fresh food isn't just good for your health, it's also better for the environment. We'll try plant-based burgers in Washington, D.C. and take a peek at what the future holds for alternative meat.
It tastes super meaty and juicy.
In Zurich, we meet an entrepreneur looking to make supermarkets and consumers more responsible.
We look to precisely measure the environmental footprint of our food.
Now it may look as if I'm in the countryside, but I'm actually in the heart of Brussels, on my way to meet a specialist from the international panel of experts on sustainable food system, the IPS Food, who will be on hand throughout the show to answer all of our questions. But first, some facts and figures that show eating healthy can help us maintain a healthier planet, and why you should care.
We are all seemingly under pressure to buy fresh food from our local farmers market, but the produce usually does cost more. Mass-produced processed food can be cheaper. It can last longer on shelves too, but their energy bill and carbon footprint are higher than locally sourced produce. In the food industry, greenhouse gas emissions are produced at each stage of the supply chain, from the growing, rearing and farming to the processing, transporting and storing, even to our homes when we cook and dispose of the food we eat. So the UN's food and agricultural body, the FAO, now promotes sustainable food systems. It believes, quote, "A sustainable food system is one that delivers food security and nutrition for all in such a way that the economic, social and environmental basis to generate food security and nutrition for future generations is not compromised." Some experts even take this a step further. They tell us changing your diets will reduce our impact on climate change.
The way we should change them is we should eat what the farmers who live in our part of the world, in our region, should produce using sustainable production methods. Farmers should be as self-sufficient as possible. That's the best way to feed ourselves. Grow our own food, or at least buy from producers who live locally to us. That's food security as well. We need more food security.
If you're wondering how you can eat to help the planet, the UN says in theory, we can all just eat less animal products. The livestock industry is responsible for nearly 15% of greenhouse gas emissions and 63% of deforestation in the Amazon, where forests are cleared for grazing lands. Then there's something else you should watch out for: food loss and waste. 1/3 of all the food produced in the world does not get eaten. That's worth around $680 billion in industrialized countries and $310 in developing ones.
We need to throw less food away and be more frugal, like we used to be during the Second World War. And in developing countries such as Africa, we need to help the farmers store their crops better.
If eating better also means eating less and spending a little more on our food, then convincing the world's population to give up industrially processed food can't be easy. The UN estimates 2 billion people suffer nutrition problems on the planet. It also says that investing in nutrition and sustainable food systems is both a moral imperative and a sound economic investment.
The menu to go green may seem like an exhausting, never-ending list. So to help us choose the healthiest option, I'm on my way to meet Olivier de Schutter, an IPS specialist who will advise us on the best way to transform our food systems. Hi Olivier, thank you for joining me. We're here at an urban farm. Tell me, what is the place about?
This place was empty some 8-9 years ago. And in 2012, a number of people came together in this center of Brussels in order to develop this urban gardening space. And they did so for pedagogical reasons, for the surrounding schools. And it's a way to allow these urban families in Brussels to have access to the food that they produce themselves or that are sold through very short supply chains.
Tell us about the IPS.
So IPS Food is a group of 28 international experts who provide recommendations to governments and other actors to move to sustainable food systems. And it is a group of experts that has been developing the idea that governments should develop food policies in order to shift to sustainability.
Olivier, tell us about the impact eating locally and seasonally can have on the health of the planet.
It's important to realize that the reason why our food systems are not sustainable is because we've encouraged the globalization of food supply schemes. We've developed trade, we've developed long supply chains, and the longer food travels, the further it travels, the more processed it is, the more packaged it shall be, and the less nutritious it shall be. It also is a way to encourage a type of farming that is not sustainable, heavily mechanized in monocultures, meant for large markets to be supplied with large volumes. So relocalizing food systems is a way to have access to much more nutritious diets. It's a way to encourage farmers to move to much more diversified farming systems that can support the health of the soil and thus allow the soil to function as a sink for carbon. It is a way, in other terms, to make food production more sustainable and to make food consumption more healthy for the people who have access to these fresh, locally produced foods.
Most people buy at least some of their food from supermarkets where, you easily buy out of season food. It's often cheaper than local or organic food. Do you see this trend changing anytime soon?
The prices do not reflect today the real impacts of food production on the ecosystems and on the planet. And if we were to pay the real price for industrially processed foods, we would pay a much higher price because we would need to compensate for all the social, health and environmental impacts of industrially produced foods.
Thanks, Olivier. Still ahead, taking the beef out of burgers, we take a look
At just how sustainable those meatless alternatives really are.
I didn't know that a plant-based burger was going to really be this good.
Welcome back to Sustainable Energy. In this new episode, we are focusing on food. Now, more of us than ever before are trying to eat healthy. According to the US research group Dining Alliance, sales of meatless alternatives in restaurants nearly jumped 270% in the last year alone. But just how much energy does it take to fuel plant-based substitutes? We take a look.
It looks like a beef burger, tastes like a beef burger, but it's not meat.
I'm pretty surprised. I didn't know that a plant-based burger was going to really be this good. It's delicious.
So what is it about these burgers?
It tastes super meaty and juicy. It has coconut for richness and beet juice to give that color and flavor that so many people are accustomed to with meat. It's our #1 seller.
Founded in 2012, Hipcity Veg's fast food plant-based menu is a commitment to sustainability.
From the beginning, I knew that plant-based eating is the way to optimal health and to a healthy planet. And I knew that the way to do that is to make it convenient, affordable, and delicious from the very first bite.
But what is in these burgers? Food consultant Ryan Wilson invited us to her kitchen to see for ourselves.
This one, and then it's full of brown rice and other vegetables, so it's much higher in dietary fiber, but lower in protein content. This is the plant-based burger here. It looks like it has some of the fat that a traditional ground beef burger has, but the protein here comes from a pea protein. This is a traditional ground beef burger here. It's really impressive when you see the final products and how far they've come to making an analog to traditional burgers.
Bruce Friedrich co-founded the Good Food Institute in 2016 with a hope of transforming agriculture away from the industrial use of animals and toward plant-based and cultivated meat.
Our current method of producing meat is responsible for more climate change than all forms of transportation combined. Plant-based meat, it's significantly better for the environment. It requires 99% less land, 90 to 95% less water, causes something like 95% less climate change. It doesn't require any of the drugs that are fed to farm animals.
Another alternative to real meat could be meat grown from cells, an ambitious product, but not quite ready for mass markets.
We can take a biopsy from an animal, so a few cells from an animal, bathe those cells in nutrients, those cells will multiply and grow. We'll end up with exactly the same meat, but produced in a much more efficient way, far less climate change, no contribution to antibiotic resistance.
But selling cultured meat to consumers means first convincing big corporations.
We're certainly focused on the biggest legacy meat and food companies, is the ones that would be absolutely game-changing if they jumped both feet into alternative protein.
For now, restaurant giants such as McDonald's, Burger King, and TGI Fridays already offer meat alternatives. So is this just another fast food fad?
Plant-based meat is for everyone. This is not a billion or $2 billion market. This is a $1.4, $1.5 trillion market. So there's a lot of room for growth. There's a lot of room for participation. And we really do need all hands on deck.
Since April 2017, total plant-based food sales have increased over 30% in the US alone to some $4.5 billion. Retail sales of plant-based meat last year increased 15% to some $800 million, while animal-based meat sales increased just 4%. Statistics that point to continuing change in our eating habits and potential benefit to the planet.
We are back in Brussels at the Urban Farm with Olivier de Schutter from IPS Food. So Olivier, what impact does meat production have on climate change?
Meat production has a major impact on climate change through three channels. First of all, livestock ruminates and large amounts of methane gases result, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. Secondly, we need to produce feedstock for the animals, maize, soybean in particular, and for this we need to clear large forest areas, so deforestation is driven by livestock production. And thirdly, we need to produce fertilizers to grow the soybean, the maize, from which this feedstock shall be made, and that too is a source of greenhouse gas emissions. So altogether, some 19-20% of man-made greenhouse gases come from industrial livestock production.
Is there a sustainable nature-based solution to limit the negative impact and maybe save energy as well?
Well, we need to reduce meat consumption for sure, but the meat that we produce can be produced in a way that is very sustainable. In fact, we need the dejections of animals in order to fertilize the soils. And if we produce meat according to agroecological techniques without resorting to industrial livestock production, we could have less meat perhaps, but better meat, one that is far more sustainable in the way it's produced.
Olivier, how do you see the future of plant-based industry?
Well, because of the impacts of livestock production and the amount of land required to produce feedstock for animals, Many people promote the idea of artificial meat. I believe we should be aware that these are extremely energy-intensive processes, especially if they are developed on a large scale, and they shall also result in meat production being concentrated in the hands of a very small number of large firms owning these sophisticated technologies. So it may not be the best and most sustainable solution in the long run.
Is this alternative meat production likely to be useful in the future, to feed the growing world population? What's your prediction?
Well, it's true that demographers warn us that the world's population shall continue to increase. It increases by 78 million persons per year today. And people, moreover, shift their diets because they live more in cities, they have a taste for animal proteins, for more diversified diets, as a result of which the pressure on resources shall continue to increase. However, we should also be aware that in the food systems as they've evolved today, we lose large amounts of food. About 1/3 of the food that is produced is lost or wasted, and we could do much more to improve the efficiency of food production. Moreover, we need to promote diets that are more sustainable, and that means more plant-based, less dependent on animal proteins, in order to reduce the ecological footprint of our diets.
Thanks, Olivier. We've got to take a quick break, but coming up next, we head to Switzerland to find out how technology is promising big changes when it comes to our food habits.
The eventual goal is that we go below 10 kilograms of meat consumption per year.
Welcome back to Sustainable Energy. You'll discover how to get precise assessment of your food's environmental footprint. Let's head over to Zurich now to meet an entrepreneur who's putting plate power in the palm of our hands.
We found out that 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions originate from our food consumption, and just the simple awareness of what pattern or what foods we consume can reduce this by more than 50%. This was the initial trigger that we founded Eternity and that we took responsibility. My name is Manuel Klammer. I am the CEO and co-founder of Eternity. We look to precisely measure the environmental footprint of our food. We are going to provide an app that allows you to scan the barcode of basically any product that you find in the supermarket, and it provides you with the carbon footprint of that product. So one fact about the Eternity Score, that's the label that we put on the product, is that we do not only calculate the CO2 emissions, but we put it in comparison to over 100,000 different products. Supermarkets have a responsibility. If they would be able to provide those numbers on the packages, on the little signs that they have there, society would shift. So that's also why we just make the data available to everyone. The initial spark gave my partner, Judith, who came up with the idea. And I was hoping that there might be some intelligence that can show us the right path towards making the right decisions when it comes to environmental impacts. We already created a web app that you can just click on our website, and you have a recipe manager. So this recipe manager specifically allows restaurants to type in a recipe and to see also the same carbon impact when it comes to meal and dish-based CO2 emissions. The eventual goal is that we go below 10 kilograms of meat consumption per year. We live in a cooperative here that 1,000 people live there, and we grow our own food. We have solar panels on the roof, electric cars. It's 1,000 people that care about sustainability, and they came all together here. It's really nice because it's also a new form of living. It's a satellite flat. It means that 10 people live together in one flat. Everyone has its own room, but we cook together and we eat together. 5 years ago, we found a great restaurant that already started serving mostly vegan and vegetarian meals. So we joined with them. We helped them communicate on the topic, but in a way that is not offensive, but it creates a pathway here. And
we are vegetarians, and we just didn't have a place to go. So we wanted to create a vibrant, modern place with just good food. I believe you can become sustainable, for example, by having a seasonal menu. Of course, working with local suppliers as well, and creating tasty dishes. So breaking maybe habits as well. Together with Eternity, we could give more fundamentals. So kind of to base it, we did a project together where we calculated all our food supply during 1 year.
Then we did the calculation with Tibbets and showed them, like, we can do 62% better and everyone is happy and it's delicious. What motivates me every day is being able to look into the eyes of my 4-year-old child. There's like this consciousness about what is going to happen if we don't act. That brings me in a kind of into a moral imperative situation, and I care about humanity, I care about people.
Olivier, how do you see the future for startups such as Eternity in the growing local food industry?
Consumers today want to be supported in making the right choices. They are concerned about the environmental impacts of their eating habits. They are concerned about the health impacts of industrialized food systems, and applications such as those that can help them to make the right choices certainly shall have a major influence in the future in shaping a new food culture that is now emerging.
Olivier, how big a part of climate change is caused by food waste?
Well, it is a major problem. We have lots of losses during the harvesting period on the fields. Food is not processed, consumed in time and gets rot. And we have food waste at different segments of the food chain, in the processing industry, in the catering industry, the food services, and of course within households. Altogether, about 1/3 of the food that we produce is lost or wasted. That is an enormous amount, and it requires that we change the focus from increasing production at all costs to reducing food losses and waste at all costs, and this can be done by improving the efficiency of food chains.
And this takes a lot of energy as well. So what use could there be, for the food that we are not actually consuming?
Well, of course, there are many uses that could be made of agricultural waste and of food that is not consumed. This is why composting schemes, and this is why the recycling in cities of non-consumed food items has developed very importantly. And we also have many cities that are encouraging small NGOs, charities to team with supermarkets in order to provide food aid to families in need in order to avoid that food that is not consumed and that nearing its sell-by date will be dumped in waste fields.
Looking forward into the future, as the world population grows, how are we going to feed 8 billion people more sustainably and more healthfully?
The future is smaller farming units that can practice a much more diversified type of farming, much better for biodiversity and soil health, and that can be very productive per hectare. The key challenge today is to move to the most resource-efficient way of producing food, to reduce food losses and waste, and to reduce, therefore, the environmental impacts of food production and consumption.
What kind of nature-based solutions can help us eat more sustainably and save more energy as well?
Well, many scientists now and the FAO are promoting the idea of agroecology, which is a much more cyclical way of producing food, much less linear and industrial. Cyclical in the sense that in agroecology, you use local inputs, you reduce the need to import external inputs, fertilizers, pesticides, and you try to recycle the waste that you produce on the farm.
Olivier, thank you for having us here at the Urban Farm, and thanks for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
From the farmer's field to the 5-star rated restaurant, the food industry looks as if it's ready to embrace a greener, more environmentally friendly future. And we hope you are too. Remember, you can join the discussion and even show us your favorite food picks by tweeting us at CNBC Energy using the hashtag #SustainableEnergy. Until next time, thanks for watching.